You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hey, Justin. Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's 2022 this morning. We made it.
It's true. We're like 10 in my time zone. We are 10 hours into the new year.
So far, is it living up to all the hype?
Everything
Great.
I'd hope for and more.
That's
because
amazing.
This is a great way to start my year with you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about are you a new year, like a resolution? Like, how do you feel about the crossing over into a new year?
I think there is something that I appreciate the sense of okay, we get a fresh start, even though it's really just
on paper,
one day to the next. Yeah.
Right.
It's sort of fictional, but yeah, I'm not really into the whole here's my resolutions and setting goals. I think I'm not a super goals type person, and it ends up kind of here's my aspirations that either I forget about come February or just never get accomplished. But I have some friends who do kind of they'll pick a theme, a word that's a theme or an intention for the year. And so that's something I think that resonates a little bit more with me as far as being a little less goal focused and a little more I don't know, reflective or introspective, and kind of this is kind of what I want to focus on in the year, whether that's, and also I've seen things where it's in the coming year, I want to do more of this or less of this.
Right.
Which I like that kind of thought as well. And just kind of I don't know, it feels gentler, which kind of resonates with me.
Yeah, because, we're always talking about our backpacks and our lists. And we don't need to add another thing. We don't need to be you know what, I need to improve myself in this way. Because you know what, we are just doing our best.
Yes, we are.
I actually last night posted on Instagram because I think our last conversation, I just keep swirling that conversation around in my brain because I think there's so many cool things we ended up talking about. And so one of the things that we talked about was when we were talking about our roles versus who we are. And we came up with some questions, I think, that I posted last night about when do you feel the most at peace? When do you feel at your best?
Right.
Because I think that it's not okay, in the next year, I will do, right? I think that's where I tend to I'll finally write the book. I'll finally I'll do the, and that gets into what we talked about last time about we're not just doers, we're beings, right? And so like you said, what can we have more of and have less of? Or how can if I find peace doing this thing or being in this way, or I feel at my best when XYZ, how can I try to embed a little more of that?
Yeah.
Because I think, like you said, sometimes these resolutions might make me feel less at peace, right? If I'm drive, go, when I first, a few months ago, left my big job to take the leap, I spent some time thinking about what do I want my day to look like? What do I want my life to look like? And every once in a while I go back at that and I'm ooh, just because, I'm falling into old traps of, I had said less social media and more meditating and praying and quiet time and sustainable food, all that stuff. And I still just eat garbage and scroll on the social media. But it's a good exercise to be what do I want my day to look like? And I'm in a lovely space where, because I now am my own boss, I can decide some of that, on a good day.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm sort of thinking about some of those pieces as we turn this corner. I felt like that on my birthday last month, that it felt very much okay, fresh start. Whereas again, it's just on the calendar, but something about it felt good. All right, new step, fresh start. But I think these last couple of years, we've just put so much pressure on these years.
Yeah.
At the end of last year, we were all right, good riddance 2020. And then a few days into 2021, we're really?
Well, and I was thinking about last year, New Year's on last year, because it felt so much different. I think last year, I mean, we're in a pandemic and vaccines were on the horizon, and there weren't these variant waves that we were facing. And it did feel a little bit more at the end of last year, that corner was turning a little bit.
Yeah.
And then this year didn't shake out that way. And so it's we kind of got burned on that. And so I don't feel, as far as the the global pandemic situation, not to make this all, I don't feel the slight optimism that was there
Oh yeah, no.
at the end of last year, which I think
I feel quite the opposite, actually.
given fair, which I think kind of also clouds the whole like feeling optimistic and bright about a new year, new beginnings, like
Yeah.
fresh starts, all of that.
Right.
Because it's been
Right.
a hard couple years and
It
like
sure has.
just worn down.
Yeah. I think one thing is that like I want to, because I think we're like characterizing these entire years as really hard, right?
Hmm.
But I think when I stop to think about it, like 2021 was the year that I finally did the thing that for like
Yeah.
4 years now I have been like, someday I just want to quit my job and do this thing I'm so
Hmm.
passionate about. And I did it,
Yeah.
right? I did it this year. And so I'm trying to like not lose that in the
Hmm.
like 2021 was garbage, right? Because it wasn't all garbage.
Right.
So I'm trying to sort of hold on to those big like celebration pieces
Hmm.
too, you know?
Yeah. And similar to that, I think it was the questions that you posted about like when do I feel my best? Like that made me think back on the year and like, and I want to like actually write this out so it's somewhere I can look back to. But like, what were those high points in 2021? Because there were
Yeah.
moments where I felt like at peace and I felt great,
Yeah.
and like there was a time in the summer where I was able to like have a couple days on a vacation with my side of the family and with their
Yeah.
side of the family and spend that time with all of the nieces and nephew, and
Right.
like those were great moments. And so there were these
Yeah.
like bright spots, and it's easy to like lump the whole year as one kind
Right.
of thing, but it certainly has been it
Right.
hasn't been
Remember
all.
when you were on that boat with those magical like birds and sea
Yeah,
creatures?
that's one of the high
Wow.
points, was just like
Yeah.
being there and like such peace and just
Right.
ease.
Right.
Mhm.
I think about on Mother's Day, I think I think this was the day we went inside my parents' house for the first time in
Right. You
a
hugged your
long, long,
mom.
long time. And I hugged my mom. And that just feels like a moment, like just like an incredible.
Mhm.
And even though you think about like, oh, it was really great because of all the hard things that had happened, who cares? Like it was this incredible
Mhm.
moment. Yeah. I know it's funny when you say like we lump it all together, because even when you said like, and I know people have done this too, pick a word for the year.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of pressure. Like a year's a long time,
Yeah.
you know? And so even when I have this like business coach who one day was like, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? I was like, oh, friend, I'm trying to get to like noon today.
Yeah. Let's get to Tuesday.
So picking like, okay, my word of the year, I'm like, oh, I don't know. That feels like a big ask.
Yeah. I mean, I've taken a stab at it, I think.
Yeah.
Like I've been thinking like reconnecting, and it's
Oh,
spurred off of like our conversation last
yeah.
time, is like talking, like thinking through these like things and hobbies that I used to do, and kind of
Yeah.
like part of it is going back to those, and do they still feel like things that I want to keep doing, or is that just,
Hmm.
is it okay that that's something I did in the past and don't do
Right.
anymore? And kind of, and also like reconnecting in the sense that like there's people I haven't seen since before the pandemic that,
Yeah.
as long, as COVID cooperates as best it can.
Yeah.
I'd like to reconnect with some of those
Yeah.
people in this coming year as well, because it's been a long isolated period that,
Right.
at some
Yeah.
point I've got to kind of change the direction on that. So
Right. Right.
so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Reconnecting.
So it's not like a real aspirational, it's just kind of like a gentle like
Yeah.
intention for the year.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. I like the gentle part, because even like I woke up early this morning and I was like, after we record, I'm going to like redo my office and I'm going to do all blah, 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 blah. And I was so excited about it this morning.
Set up your calendar for the new year. You got
Yeah.
all the
Well, I think just like I have all this stuff on my wall. And one thing I want to get better at is I'm not good at celebrating things.
mm-hmm,
Because I'm always like moving on to the next thing.
mm-hmm.
And so I want to sort of set up like a celebration wall to like sort of
Oh, that's great.
track like this great thing happened, this great thing, this, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Because otherwise I just move on too quickly to either the hard thing or like to the next biggest thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so this morning I was all hyped up and now I'm feeling like maybe I'll take a nap instead, which is fine. So I want to
That's a
like
great way to
be
spend the day
gentle
too. Mm-hmm.
with myself, right?
Yep.
And not get stuck on those goals. So
Mm-hmm.
part of this is making me think about, in preparation for our conversation today, I asked you to take the Enneagram test.
Yeah, you
I think
did.
it will relate to our conversation because so I am an Enneagram 3. and I redid it recently, and I'm 92% an Enneagram 3. I was wondering if it had changed. It has not. Right. I continue to be a 3. And a 3 is an achiever.
Okay.
And so for me, that's why it's hard to celebrate things, because it's always like, yeah, cool. I mean, I just had this big accomplishment, but whatever, I have to go accomplish another thing. Big into like checklists and to-dos. Weeks like this week, we're on January 1st today. So this week, where it's sort of like this quiet week, can sometimes be hard for me, because it's hard for me to like not be productive. And so what we were talking about discussing today is something that I think we're all pretty exhausted by right now, is the concept of decision fatigue.
Right. Yeah.
Around COVID, but around all the things and what that looks like as a caregiver. And so one of the things I thought we could talk about related to that is the Enneagram piece. And so
for sure.
When you took the test recently, tell me, what were your results?
So I got number 9, which I understand is like a peacemaker. I was 100% match.
You're all in on that peacemaker.
That is what I am.
Not just a little PC, all the way.
All the way.
Peacemaker. Okay.
So yeah, I haven't really delved. I printed out like my results. Unfortunately, I forgot to read through them in detail to be prepared before our conversation here. But it's my understanding that like I, as a peacemaker, like I want to make sure that like if in the context of decisions that like things are good with everybody, and I'm not very decisive in that sense, and I want everybody to kind of be happy and
harmonious.
Harmonious is a great way to put that. Yeah.
Yes.
And so also not very decisive, and like that checks out, I think.
Yeah.
Conflict averse. Yeah.
I happen to live with a 9.
Okay.
Sean Michael Brininger is also a 9. And this even looks like, if we say, what should we have for dinner? The response is typically, what would you like for dinner?
Oh, I know that line.
And so sometimes I have to like trick them almost into like, because it's always, oh, what would you like? What would you like? What would you like? What would she like? What would they like? What would, it's very, 9 sometimes have a hard time finding their own voice.
Yeah.
Because they want to be harmonious and they want what other people. And so when we talk about making decisions, that can be, that can be hard, because sometimes I feel like not only is my counterpart a person who doesn't feel comfortable making decisions because he wants everyone else to, feel great, but also is not always in the physical or mental space to be able to make decisions.
Right.
Just because of his illness. And so I think that plays a part too, right? Sure. In making decisions. And so do you feel like that too, like with Sarah? Do you have a guess? Has Sarah ever taken the Enneagram test?
I don't think so. No, I don't know. I don't know enough to make a guess as far as what she would be, but yeah, it might be something interesting.
Yeah. But she probably isn't a 9.
No, she wouldn't be. We're not. I wouldn't think so.
Do you feel like in the before times, like 10 years ago, when you would like have to make a decision together as a couple, what did that look like?
I mean, I think we were pretty good about like talking it through together, but I think like when it came time to make the choice and to be decisive, like she was better in that, in like, okay, this is what we should do kind of thing. Whereas I think I would just take longer and kind of like go back and forth and kind of get stuck in the like weighing the options kind of before like, okay, here's the decision, let's do it kind of thing. Yeah.
So how has that shifted now that she, struggles with a couple of these different illnesses? Like, do you feel like now more of the decision making is on your shoulders because she isn't always able to make the decisions?
Right. Yeah. I think that's something that has changed over the course of her illness.
Okay.
I think early on, she was much less able to, I guess, participate in decision making when she was, primarily in bed and before we kind of got things figured out. And so as someone who was not decisive and not great with decisions, like suddenly having more decisions because like there's all this medical decisions to be making that feel very high stakes, not being great at like being decisive on that kind of stuff and
Yeah.
not having the person to like talk through and as part of
Yeah.
that decision making process and just kind of like being on my own in that was really hard for sure.
Yeah.
And so thankfully over time, like she's now in a much better place than that. And so it's much easier now for a lot of stuff in that we're able to kind of talk through stuff. And there's
Mhm.
times she's, I think, very aware of or she is aware that being decisive is not my strong suit, and
Mhm.
is can like when we need to be decisive can step in and help out with that, or when she
Mhm.
sees that I'm kind of floundering on like what should we do here, which I think like my anxiety
Mhm.
also like feeds into that,
For sure.
and making it difficult sometimes to make decisions or to kind of
'Cause it
sort stuff
questions
out.
everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so she can sometimes be just like, "Oh, stop, this is what we're going to do." And
Oh.
just like
Oh, that's brilliant.
which is great. And I'm so thankful that, that there's times when she can just step in and just be like, "No, like."
I am feeling pangs of jealousy at that statement that you just said, that just tells you what
Well,
to do sometimes. Oh,
yeah.
or what you both should do. That's amazing.
But there's also still, one of her like symptoms from like her fibromyalgia, and I think it's tied in with the ME as well, is like brain fog.
Right.
And so there's definitely still times when it's like she just can't whether it's be as present for a decision or just doesn't have that decisiveness.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, then I have to just decide on stuff more often. And it's part of it is, there's the piece about you have like somewhat more decisions because you're making medical decisions,
Mhm.
and like that's a whole new like world. And I guess right now there's so many more decisions that we have to make and risks that we have to weigh with the pandemic,
Mhm.
like that. And that's like a whole nother
Mhm.
piece of this that is just like worn down my like
Mhm. Mhm.
decision fatigue for sure.
Mhm.
But there's also just like all the like mundane decisions that you make throughout the day
Right.
as like humans, that and as like a couple, that like now that all, whereas before that was split,
Yeah.
it's things like what should we have for dinner,
Right.
that kind of stuff just all suddenly falls on one of the people. And so
Right.
it's like that, even though those are pale in comparison as to like, what treatment path should we go down,
Right.
there's still decisions that have to be made every single day,
Constant.
and they're
Yes.
just constantly there, and that really
Yes.
can be draining. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this combination of both losing your decision-making partner in
Hmm.
some cases and having way more decisions that you need to
Hmm.
make
Yeah.
than you used to,
Right.
right?
And then not
Yeah.
starting off as not a personality type that is
Right.
decisive,
Right.
and then adding in the anxiety as well that doesn't
Oh gosh.
help. And it's hard. It's real hard.
Yeah. What about in moments like when that, a few months ago, and then it was like, do we go to the ER? Do we not go to the ER? Like she was having those kind of pretty intense moments.
Hmm.
Like, how does that show up as far as making decisions? Like, do you
Um,
feel like in those moments, like she's really sick, she's on the floor, I have to decide, or is she able, you know what I mean? Like, how does that go
mhm.
for you?
Yeah, that's hard because I feel a lot of pressure that like, okay, it's on me to make a decision about what we should do in this case. And in that specific instance, I'm thankful that we weren't, living on our own, and that we had Sarah's parents here to kind of be like,
Yeah, true.
this is what's happening. And her dad as a doctor being like, yeah, then you
Yeah.
should go.
Yeah.
And that felt like there was another voice kind of
Yeah.
pushing us in a direction. And Sarah very much also was like, I think she didn't want to go, but she felt like, yeah,
Right.
this is what we should be doing. And so,
Yeah.
but I feel in those moments, and there have been other moments. I mean, the first time we went to the ER with her headache, I think was a similar thing where that was just the two of us.
Yeah.
And like, I guess this is what we do. Um, yeah, it feels like a lot of pressure
Yeah.
that like this is on my shoulders, and like,
Hmm.
and I don't know why it's difficult, because like it feels like it should be just like I'm going to go with the like conservative choice of like let's go to the ER, but it's also, I guess then if they can't help or they can't do anything,
Right.
it's, we've just been on an exhausting trip, and that's going to
Right.
set her back as she's going to crash from that. And so, yeah, it is.
Right. Well, in these days, especially like a trip to the ER is like, well, that's got its own risks.
For sure. Yeah.
And then you think about insurance and all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just like okay, if I mess up and I choose the wrong thing for dinner, like who cares? Right. There's no wrong thing for dinner. But these are, like you said, they're high stakes. These are really high stakes decisions that we have to make.
Yeah.
Yeah. Over here, I feel like because, I think I've always been a 3. I think Sean's always been a 9, but I think that he has in the last years become more 9-ish.
Okay.
Like he's very like Buddha, like Zen master guy. Like he is all about the harmony. In like big picture too. I mean, like he just, that's what he sort of oozes is like his hope for harmony. And that I think has intensified, after all these experiences that he has had, that he is even more so like yearning for peace and hoping for peace for, so I think that in combination with, I mean, he certainly has brain fog at times or, he isn't feeling well enough to whatever, that I think, whereas before, I think even though he was like a 9 and whatever, we'd be able to make decisions together and I would probably lean towards the more decisive, but it was like a group thing. I think that now there are definitely times where I feel like, oh man, like I am in this on my own to make this hard decision, and I think especially around COVID, it has been, I mean, my gosh, just, what do you call that? Assessment of risk? Is that what we call it?
Yeah,
that we're
something
just
like
constantly
that.
doing?
Yeah, like, is it okay for me to go to the grocery store today?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Right. So like our daughter's very, 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 very best friend, we found out that she is not vaccinated. And so then, she also brings our daughter so much joy. And so then it's like this whole thing where I'm like, okay, so what do we, and then do this, and so sometimes it feels hard that there's like all those daily, but whereas before it'd be more like, do we have time this weekend to have another person over for a sleepover? Yes, no, whatever, not a big deal. Now it feels like, am I putting his physical health at risk if I say yes? Am I putting her mental health at risk if I say no? Am I being rude to this mom if I say we have to have her tested? Like, all the things. And sometimes I find that I have to even like call in another decision maker.
Right.
Like I call my mom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, mom, I need you to just help me. I can't tell you how many times I've had to say that. I need you to help me think through this. Like, there's too much swirling around in my brain. I can't make the decision. He's not able to be helpful in this moment, like, and I think the decisions really are overwhelming for him as well. And because he's a peacemaker, he also tends to like be, what would it be? Less conservative about it. Like he would tend towards the like, well, it'll make Maya happy. And so therefore, let's just have her over. Right. Whereas I'm assessing all of the risk. And also he doesn't want to be the one that's like causing the problem because he's the most at risk guy. And so, then I have to be the one that's like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea, And it's just, like when we talk about our backpack full of rocks, right?
That's a lot.
A lot of rocks. Or even like when we went to Indiana for Christmas and I was the one that said, okay, I'm going to like reach out to all the relatives and say like, I'm going to send everyone a COVID test to your doorstep step. And so that we all know we're negative going into it. But then even throughout, then they were different, like, okay, now this person's coming, but they were tested like 3 days ago. Is that okay? And just like all the constant, like, okay, now there's this person. Oh, there's it, like, and it just feels relentless.
Yeah.
The amount of decisions to make on a daily basis just to try to keep us healthy, and then now at this point, I'm like, okay, we're like a week out. So I feel like, okay, we're probably, knock on wood, probably safe, probably did okay. So then when you're on the other side of it, you're like, oh, well, great. I'm so glad we went. I'm so glad we got to see all those people. I guess it's fine that I hugged them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then you also think about like, what if he had gotten it or whatever, then would that have been worth it?
Right.
I don't, like,
yeah, that's like, it's hard to look back on decisions like that, I think. And I think one thing, I don't know, I've seen it multiple places, I think, in the context of like making decisions in like medical and caregiving stuff. And this, I don't know, I think it's been more in the context of like when you have to decide on like a treatment path or something like that. It's like you have to kind of like draw a line in the sand and like, this is the date that I'm making the decision.
Yeah.
And this is all the information I have.
Yes.
And I'm making it based on that.
Yep.
And then you can't really, I don't know, it's hard not to go back, whatever happens in the future, to second
Right.
guess the decision that you made. But and it goes back to like being gentle with yourself and being like, in
Yeah.
that moment, like at that day, this is the information that was in front of me. I
Right.
made the best decision I could at that
Yep.
time. And like, that's what we did.
Yeah. That is I've heard that before, but it's such a good reminder
Mm-hmm.
that it's like, okay, once you cross over that line, you've made the decision, you're in it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we had like the most intense version of this that we had was a few years ago when Sean had throat cancer
Mm-hmm.
and it was inoperable. And we had actually, the University of Minnesota said it's too dangerous to operate. We're going to do we think we should do radiation, even though we know
Mm-hmm.
radiation is really dangerous.
Right.
We went to the Mayo Clinic, like the Mayo Clinic. They
Mm-hmm.
said it's too dangerous to do radiation. We're going to do surgery. So they told us exact opposite, like these two like very well respected institutions. Yeah. And then they said, you guys get to decide.
That's a nightmare.
We're like, what? What do you mean we get to decide? Like, we don't have any medical background.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those, I don't know if you ever feel like this, but it's sometimes you're like, how did we get to be the grown-ups?
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
We're the grown-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're the ones making these decisions. How is that? How did that happen? You know, we had to just weigh all these like pros and cons of things. And, you know, like, and I think someone at that point, maybe it was you, said that to me. Like, you just got to like draw a line in the sand and say, like, you made your decision and now you move forward, and what happens, and all of that stuff. And obviously we went with the University of Minnesota and it all worked out well. And I can't say how I would have felt if it hadn't gone well. You know, like if I would have been like, if only we had gone to Mayo instead, right? Like you know, I'm sure I probably would have, you know, but you can't, I say you can't, but I'm sure that's what my brain would have done, is second guessed those decisions. But yeah, I just think, you know, I think especially with COVID, it's like in retrospect when it goes fine, because now I think, okay, it's been however long, almost 2 years. Oh my goodness. And we have dodged it so far. And we've also been super, super careful. Right. And so for any of those events that we have attended, or sending Maya back to school, or all of those things, it's like, okay, well, great. We did those and it all worked out well. But we know people who have died. We know people who've been in the ICU for like 6 months.
Right.
You know, and so certainly for any of them, I mean, I had like a chunk of family members early on who all just went out for lunch at the Olive Garden. All 4 of them got it. 1 died. 3 ended up hospitalized. You know what I mean? It's like, was that lunch worth it? No. But we just don't know. Like, you don't know how it's going to end up. And so that's why I feel like as a world, we are like, I don't think decision fatigue is even like a strong enough.
Yeah. Whatever the next level.
Exhaustion. Decision exhaustion.
That's certainly feels, a little more appropriate.
Right.
Way to put that.
Yeah. You this week had like a little scare or something, didn't you?
Well, we were watching a movie, and like halfway through the movie, I was like, my throat is sore. And, you know, my anxiety like took that and ran with it. And I had like a massive panic attack. And like, is this COVID now? And so like, well, we don't have any tests in the house. And so like, I can't, those are unavailable to go out and get anywhere, an at-home test. And like looking online at the options to go, get a test somewhere, and like they were like a week and a half out before I could get any appointment for any of those. And so it's like, I can't get like, those would be like pieces of information that would help, that it's letting something else make the decision. Because like, if I could have taken a test and it said, okay, you're negative, it's like, okay. Or like, okay, you have COVID.
Right.
Then it's like, okay, now we have to go to this like
next step. Yep.
Next step situation. But as multiple people pointed out, it also was like, you're somewhere where it is extremely cold right now, and you've been outside a lot, like taking Mosey out, and like the air's really dry. And so it's like very, reasonable for you to have a sore throat right now. And I woke up in the morning and felt fine. And so like, it was nothing. But that was that. it was a stressful couple hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about some of the folks who say like, we shouldn't be living in fear. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's different for our households.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you were a single guy living in your house, I was a single woman living in my house, and we got it and we had sniffles. Okay. That's too bad. Right.
Yeah.
But that is not our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to sort of remind folks that like, if you or I got it, right, it's not us so much that we're worried about. It's the people in our lives who are so at risk that it could be really, really terrible for. And so it's that extra thing that we're carrying around is it's not just we're not just making the decision for us, or like when I'm deciding if Maya's friend can come over, it's not so much I'm worried that Maya's going to get it, but it's I'm worried that Maya's going to get it. Maya's going to give it to Sean. And then what?
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and it's that, and it's even, at least for me, it's okay. I get it. Say I were to get COVID, like there is the piece of like, okay, then what if Sarah gets it? But it's also like, that's a huge disruption on like the daily like caregiving that I do and like the tasks I do for her and kind of like that. And, you know, we're not in a situation where it's just the two of us. So that would certainly be a lot easier.
Right.
But it's just like it would be a huge disruption to the like regular routines and like to work through all of that in addition to like the health risk.
Right.
You know, even if it's just that like I had to isolate for 5 days or something.
Right.
Like COVID, like the actual
you do
disease
a lot
aside,
caregiving. Yeah.
That would be a difficult thing to work through.
Yeah. That's a really good point that will now haunt me. Thank you very much for that.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, we've talked in the past about, no, it's fine, about, you know, like us going on vacations and whatever, and like all the preparation that you did when you went on a trip without Sarah to cover the bases so that all of her caregiving needs would be met while you were gone. And so it's a really good point that like, if you were out for the count and had to be isolated for 5 days or whatever, or didn't feel well, all the things, like that's it's not just like, well, it's a bummer, I'll go watch some movies. It's like she has needs that you usually fill.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Ugh. I think something else we've talked about a lot is like things like research, and should we be, as caregivers, should we be always like looking for the next best thing and looking for the cure and looking for the whatever. And there's this doctor here in Minneapolis who is kind of one of the Fanconi anemia experts. And we've heard, because, you know, it's such a small community, we talk to a lot of people. So we have heard from a number of different people lately that he has been having them do a preemptive scope of their, esophagus.
Okay.
Which, you know, Sean gets these scopes all the time, but they only go down to his throat. They don't go all the way down. And so this guy has been having people do like a preemptive one, and then doing like a whole bunch of biopsies, like all the way down the esophagus to like preemptively look for things.
Right.
And I'm just thinking, like, everybody we've talked to has been like, oh yeah, Sean should probably be doing that. But like the doctor himself hasn't reached out to us yet. And so it's one of these things too, where I'm like, I should just email him and be like, should Sean be doing this thing? And I'm sure he's going to say, yep, let's schedule it. And it sounds terrible. Yeah. It sounds terrible because it's like sounds like a terrible, painful thing to have. Like, I think they do like 40 biopsies, I think.
Oh my goodness.
So that sounds terrible. But I'm also like terrified to be like, what are they going to find?
Right.
Which sounds like, so irresponsible to be like, no, you should want to find it so that you can fix it. And also, like that feels like a lot to be like, let's go digging for something that we haven't, that we don't know about yet, you know? So that's the kind of thing where like, that's not on Sean's radar. Like, he's not going to be like, you know what we should do? Schedule that thing. Like, that's not the, you know, it's not the kind of things that go swirling around in his mind, but it's definitely in mine.
Yeah.
And so that's a decision moment where I'm like, oh, should I, should be, am I being irresponsible by not doing it? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's a lot of weight to be carrying around.
Yeah. That reminds me of like the research piece of earlier on when we were trying to figure out like, one, what's going on with Sarah, and two, like as we got these first started to get diagnoses and like, okay, what are treatment options? Like, given that, you know, particularly with her ME, like there's not a like a standard playbook kind of thing as far as treating it. And so there is a, coming across a wide variety of, whether it's off-label medication uses that people have tried, doctors have, tried, or different, just a wide range of things. And like, okay, here's a dozen different options that different, people and doctors have tried that maybe have results. And it's like, okay, well, what should we be doing? And like, okay, should I, bring these 12 options to her doctors and be like, okay, what should we do with all of this? Or like, what do I need to research them more? Some of them would be ones, things that we would just do at home to kind of like take the lead on. And like, I guess one of the things was that's how we figured out her POTS was like that came up in like taking her heart rate. And like, we discovered that. But it's just like, suddenly there's all of this information in front of you. And it's like, I have to like sort through it and like advocate for a cause. And like, it's just, and that's all on top of the like day-to-day stuff. And that's where it's like so much of the time, like getting through every day is like all you have.
Right.
To then like have this research or like decisions about that, or which doctors to try to get in to see. And that's what was such a like blessing about the medication that actually made the biggest difference, biggest difference for her, is it's like, I didn't know that, I was unaware of that. And it's something that another patient had mentioned to her doctor. And so her doctor like brought it to us, and it was just like, what a gift that like,
yes,
someone else had that for us.
Yeah. And yet, like, if somebody was listening, I would hope they would do so with compassion. But it's sort of like, well, if there was a way that you could be like fighting for the cure or doing the research that would help big picture, and then you wouldn't have the day-to-day stuff, right? And it's like, yeah, it's true, but yes, and
well, it goes back to those circles we talked about last time. It's like, there's us. So like the circle that is like my capacity, and there's like, caregiving is a big circle inside of that, and there is, my employment, and there's time for me, but like to add a big thing of like researcher and patient advocate, like those are huge, can take up huge amounts of space, and like depending on where my capacity is, and right now it's not a lot, it's just, there's not I wish I could have the time and energy and be able to like somehow spend the whatever hours needed to like be on top of what the latest research was for everything, and like know what to be pushing for. Like, that's just not realistic, at least for me right now in our situation.
Well, and let's remind ourselves that neither of us have a medical background.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so it's like, if the scientists out there haven't figured it out, like, how are we supposed to figure it out? So what if, like, if a supporter is listening, I'm trying to think, are there ways that supporters can help?
I think that like it's something we've talked about a lot, and it plays into the decision fatigue, is it's the not asking, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And it's the being specific. Like that's the base to start with as a supporter, it's like, is what I'm like, don't make the caregiver have to make a decision on something if you can help it.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that in relationship to this. That if you're like, okay, well, tell me what I can do. How can I help? It's like, okay, now that's a decision. I don't have decision fatigue. I have decision exhaustion. And you just gave me a decision to make. Right. So to say, I'm going to bring dinner on Tuesday. Would you like it at 5 or 6? You know what I mean? Or something like that feels easy enough. Or like, does your family prefer Mexican or Italian? Like, make it a multiple choice, not an essay question. Right. The other thing I think about that is, we picture the backpack, we picture the circles. Now, I love your circles. And so if every time somebody takes something off of your list, it provides you more space.
For sure.
Right. And so like, if in your capacity circle right now, it's all filled up, and part of that is like making dinner every night or whatever. And if somebody comes and says, I'm going to make dinner for you 3 nights this week. That just freed up space and time and energy that might translate later into you having more capacity to make a hard decision.
For sure.
Or do some research or whatever that is. But I think anytime we can take something off a caregiver or just a human's plate, you free up some capacity to do something else, which might be make a decision, right? And if we're more well rested, even by like an inch, and then a hard thing comes up, we're going to be better able to make that decision in that moment.
Yeah.
The other thing I wonder about is like when I have my mom and I have my best friend who are both like brilliant ladies who I'm very grateful are also both like really up on all the COVID latest.
Yeah.
So I have 2 people in my life that I can say, can you help me think through this?
That's what I was just going to say is like, if you're a supporter and you have that like relationship with the person you're supporting, the caregiver you're supporting, like to be able to listen and to be there to help them work through some of the decisions that they have to make. And depending on, your relational dynamic, like maybe helping, like making the decision for it, like being there and being able to be like, this is what I think you should do, kind of like taking it a step beyond just listening and being able to like actually offer a solution if that's something that they're asking for, if that's,
right. I think that could be dicey, right? Because I think there's plenty of people and probably in everybody's lives who want to just come in and tell us what to do.
Yes.
Whether we want them to or not.
Right.
So supporters, please make sure that you're hearing that carefully. That we're not asking for unsolicited advice and we're not asking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you see them struggling with a decision, even if it's, again, you can be an objective helper to be like, okay, do you want me to help you walk through the pros and cons? Do you want me to help just write things down while you talk? But often I think that so many people would like to give unsolicited advice in general, but especially when they see a hard situation. And so it's not that we're asking for you to just come and solve it, because that might not be helpful. Unless someone says, can you just tell me what you would do? If they say that, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Right. If it's coming from the caregiver, like, hey, can you help me what's the decision here? Like, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, let it be led in that direction.
Yes.
I think. Yes.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh, so many things. That just makes you think about like the little tiny daily decisions we make, and then all the COVID decisions we make, and then the medical like emergency decisions, and then the big picture like researchy decisions. And no wonder we're tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think too, I mean, the reason I had you do the Enneagram thing is I just think in any part of our life, I think things like that I find to be helpful to know like what role does our like wiring play.
Yeah.
And so like for you to see that like your wiring makes it that on even a good day, decision making isn't a forte, isn't a strength for you. It's something that's more challenging. So I don't know if people who are listening, if, we just Googled up like Enneagram quiz or whatever, make sure it's free, do a free one. But things like that, I think can just sort of help us better understand ourselves as we're going through hard things, to know that like, okay, I know my wiring is going to make it so that I'm going to want to make sure everyone's harmonious and I have to make these decisions. And so how can I hold both of those at the same time?
That's, yeah, great advice.
Yeah. The word that keeps like zinging around in my head as we talk is gentle, because you brought that up a couple of times. And now I think maybe I want that to be like my word of the year.
Yeah.
Something about gentle. I've heard a couple people lately say something about like a soft space, like they just need like a soft space to land or something. And so I just think that gentle is not an Enneagram 3 word. Threes are like achieve, keep going. And I think that I want to make sure that I continue to be, or start to be, more gentle with myself on a day-to-day basis. And also just, I think that word gentle to me feels like no matter what happens this year, like good, bad, ugly, like I'm going to just be gentle with myself. That. And so thank you for giving me that word.
Yeah. I hope that works out, or whatever that looks like. I hope that you're able to do that and to find ways to be gentle with yourself.
Thank you.
And,
yeah. Thank you. All right. Here's to 2022.
Yeah. Another
That's
year.
So weird to say.
It is.
It's just strange to say. But you told me that we just hit a new milestone.
Yeah, we did. At the turn of the year, we hit 6,000 downloads. So
6,000. Wow.
It's wild how this thing has grown.
It has. So thanks to all of you who are listening and who have been with us through 2020 and 2021. And we're excited about another year together, the two of us, and with all of you. So thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm. And always, we love to hear from you. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Yes, for sure. If you have things that you would love to hear us talk about, or we've talked about bringing in experts to talk about things, or whatever that might be, or whatever, just reach out. You can find us on Instagram or at the website, insickness.care, and we'd love to hear from you. So, all right, my friend.
All right.
Enjoy these last couple of days of your break, and let's be gentle with ourselves.
Sounds good.
All right. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.